And welcome back to Thom Hartmann University, to our book club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And this is from page 60. The chapter is Extinctions, Diversity Supports Survival. The consolidation of power and wealth in the hands of a very few rich individuals and multinational corporations has made some businessmen and politicians rich, but it's also aggregating and wiping out resources. We're directly competing with every other form of life on the planet. As long as there was more out there to exploit, growth was possible. Now, as we approach the closed limits of our planet's capacities to generate food and process our wastes, sustainable growth has to be re-examined for the oxymoron it is. And even if nature doesn't kill us off, it seems that we're bent on doing it ourselves, or to ourselves. Pesticide use in the United States is up over 3,000% since World War II. Yet more pesticides doesn't mean fewer crops lost to insects. To the contrary, we're losing 20% more of our crops to insects than in 1945. But because of increasing insect resistance to pesticides and mechanized farming techniques, the pesticide industry has economically addicted many farmers to their product. Harmless species are disappearing, but no harmful insect species has been eradicated. But while the insects, who can evolve through hundreds to millions of generations during the period of a single human lifespan generation, are becoming immune to our pesticides, we are not. This leaves us vulnerable to the poisons that we ourselves manufacture to kill off another species. For example, in September 1997, the New York Times featured a story by reporter John H. Cushman Jr. titled, "Cancer in Kids Increases, New Toxins Suspected." The story chronicled how the rate of cancer among children in the United States has skyrocketed since the 1970s, when we were using far less than half of the agricultural chemicals we are now, to the point now where the odds are 1 in 600 of a child born today getting cancer before the age of 10. Childhood cancer has become the second leading cause of childhood death behind accidents, and is now the most common fatal childhood disease, accounting for fully 10% of all childhood deaths. Since 1973, for example, rates of acute lymphoblastic leukemia increased 27% in boys and girls, and brain cancer is up 40% over the same period. 99% of all U.S. mother's milk today contains detectable levels of DDT. In 1950, it was found that 0.5%, 0.5% of U.S. male college students were infertile. In 1978, a study found that number had skyrocketed to 25%. And in the past 32 years, the average American male's sperm production has dropped by 30%. Some researchers attribute this to the accumulation of chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticides, which are often intended to render insects sterile, while others speculate that some plastics used in food packaging mimic the female hormone estrogen, and may be demasculizing men and increasing the risk of breast and uterine cancer in women. But that's just the beginning of the problem. In 1960, routine feeding of antibiotics to farm animals was virtually unknown. Antibiotic administration to meat animals has increased so much since then, however, that today over 55% of all antibiotics manufactured in the United States are put into animals or animal feed. This has turned our livestock into a vast breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant microorganisms. The American pharmaceutical and meat industries don't consider this a problem, nor do the politicians to whom they contribute millions of dollars a year, and continue to support the routine administration of these drugs to dairy and meat animals. But that stance is hardly supported by any common knowledge in science. The European Economic Community, the common market, has banned American meat products grown with antibiotics. Why? The research which so concerned the Europeans showed that in 1960, only 13% of American human staphylococcus infections were resistant to penicillin. By 1988, however, the number of penicillin-resistant staph infections in Americans had exploded to over 90%. Muppets creator Jim Henson was killed by such a drug-resistant infection, for example, despite his substantial wealth and his access to the most sophisticated and expensive healthcare system in the world. And it's not just on land. Ocean studies specialist James W. Porter of the University of Georgia points to the explosion of human viruses and bacteria filling the water of the planet's oceans, killing off coral reefs and spreading disease among humans and other life forms. He projects that 20 to 30% of coral reefs are at risk, with a 446% increase in infections just since 1996 among the reefs he has been monitoring off the Florida coast. University of South Florida researcher Joan B. Rose points out that between 20 and 24% of all people swimming in Florida's coastal beaches become infected with viruses, which can cause heart disease, ear infections, sore throats and eyes, meningitis, gastrointestinal disease, hepatitis, and diabetes. About 1%, she says, become chronically infected. Similarly, a sampling of shellfish from New York waters found over 40% infected with human pathogens. And a sampling of water from the Waikiki Beach in Hawaii found that more than a third of the samples tested were infected with human viruses. At the same time, Vermont ice cream manufacturer Ben & Jerry's is suing the government. They want to put on the label of their ice cream that the milk they use is from cows free of synthetic growth hormones. And it continues with that sort of story. So this is just, one piece of the last hours of Ancient Sunlight.